Well guys, after months of supposed game testing and weeks of waiting post-release, DICE has finally acted on some of the fans' most urgent issues with patch 1.1.1.5. Dropping today, November 11th, patch 1.1.1.5 will finally start to address a few of the game's biggest concerns, things like the recon drone exploit, dispersion bugs, and audio reliability. And while today's fixes are welcome, it's worth mentioning that this patch is only a single step in the right direction, as there are some pretty glaring exceptions. If you were looking for a full fix of the current state of the gunplay, hit reg, or ghost bullets, I hate to say it, but this patch still isn't it. And the devs are still shying away from discussing the game's brutally over-engineered recoil system, which makes weapons actively fight back against the player. Today's patch is a good step towards improving quality of life issues, however, I'm not sure it'll stop the game's current hemorrhaging player count that's averaging a decrease of about 10,000 players a day as this multi-million-dollar 4 AAA studio strong production loses players hand over fist to ARC Raiders and soon possibly Call of Duty. But before we dive into the details, if you enjoy in-depth reviews, breakdowns, and discussions on all things Battlefield, make sure to drop a like and hit subscribe before we talk Battlefield's second big patch, Update 1.1.1.5. So, according to DICE, today's update is a quality of life patch rolling out at 9 AM UTC. It's meant to bring refinements to vehicle countermeasures, weapon accuracy, battle royale match flow, and overall gameplay stability. So, on paper, it sounds great, and to be fair, the patch does include several meaningful improvements that directly address some of the game's more visible issues. For starters, the developers have fixed an exploit that allows players to ascend and access unintended areas by standing on a recon drone and hitting it with a sledgehammer. If you've been unlucky enough to get killed by someone sitting way out of bounds on top of the map, you'll appreciate that this one is finally gone. Though I feel like they should have just disabled the drone over the past week or so, in all honesty. They've also corrected a long-standing issue where guided missiles didn't get countered properly when met with enemy countermeasures like flares. That's been a major frustration for vehicle players where even perfectly timed flares didn't guarantee survival. Now, according to the notes, those systems should now behave consistently, which means way fewer instances of lock-on missiles getting through flares. They also addressed an issue where vehicles didn't spawn correctly in Breakthrough and Conquest. That's one of those fixes that feels like it shouldn't need to exist in the first place, but it's nice to see that it's handled. Alongside that, they've corrected a problem where matches would sometimes start with all sectors and objectives active at once. And anyone who's played those rounds knows how chaotic that could get. For Battle Royale players, the patch includes a series of stability and match flow improvements as it fixes situations where Battle Royale matches wouldn't end after the final team was eliminated, and also resolves cases where getting killed immediately after a mobile respawn completed would wipe the squad instead of reviving teammates. They even mentioned fixing an issue where players could become stuck in a top-down view of the map after redeploying, and another where the second chance mechanic didn't deactivate correctly after redeploy. So it seems that the devs have finally cleaned up many of the bugs that totally broke that mode, though I've recently experienced some network errors in the BR that don't seem to have been addressed.
I like the look of these.
Moving on, progression and UI received some attention too. There's finally a fix for the shotgun challenge, kill 5 enemies with a shotgun without reloading, which wasn't completing correctly, and they also corrected an issue where progress for the Engineer Specialist 3 assignment wasn't saving. They also fixed the vehicle customization menu so locked anti-air presets now actually display their unlock criteria. Portal also got a pass where the developers fixed a bug where spawn loot didn't spawn ammo or armor, and another where players who were supposed to have blocked access to community creations could still access user-generated matches if their party leader hosted one. And finally, audio and radio bugs have been addressed, like the issue where activating the BF Pro radio channel through the comms wheel didn't play any sound. Now, of course, the most talked about section of the patch notes focuses on dispersion and weapon handling. DICE claims they've fixed an issue where dispersion could be higher than intended when going from sprinting to firing in ADS. They also mention correcting an issue where dispersion incorrectly scaled with movement speed and always assumed the player was moving at maximum speed for their stance. They've tuned landing animations to reduce excessive camera and weapon movement when aiming down sights, improving stability during and after a landing, and resolved cases where ADS aim could be displaced when sliding. These are solid quality of life fixes that should make movement and aiming feel a bit more predictable, and on paper, that's exactly what players have been asking for. The issue, though, is that these are still surface level changes, all things considered. They correct small inconsistencies in weapon handling, but they haven't addressed the much bigger problem with the entire recoil and dispersion system itself. If you've been keeping up to date with the conversation around Battlefield 6's gunplay, you know that the recoil system isn't just inconsistent, it's actively manipulated based on player input. The game's principal designer even admitted that the recoil algorithm reads how the player is controlling the weapon and then dynamically adds or redirects recoil in response, essentially causing the gun to fight back against you. This means every gunfight feels different. One engagement might feel tight and responsive, while the next feels like you're fighting the weapon instead of your opponent. That's not a skill-based system, it's just randomness disguised as a skill curve. The same goes for bloom and dispersion. Even though the patch corrected some scaling issues, the overall bloom system is still far too heavy-handed, and I doubt these few changes will be the last of what's needed to get this system feeling like it should be. Then there's the ongoing hit reg and ghost bullet problem, which the patch notes don't mention anywhere. And that's concerning because it's arguably the biggest issue hurting the game's core experience. Players have been reporting cases where bullets simply don't register server-side when you see hit markers, hear the sounds, and even get blood splatter, but the server doesn't count the damage. It's easily one of the most frustrating issues in the game, and the silence around it with these patch notes suggests that DICE still hasn't found a reliable fix, thus leaving its occasional occurrence as the cherry on top of an already suspect gameplay system. So when you stack that with the game's broader networking issues with desync, stuttering, and wait times, it's clear that the overall gameplay stability is being used as a vague blanket phrase rather than a concrete commitment to fixing the netcode. And the fact they've tied that phrase to the patch without outlining exactly what stability actually means makes it feel more like a marketing phrase than transparency, in my opinion, where the devs are leaning on small incremental changes that might take weeks to substantiate. So yes, this patch brings meaningful fixes. The drone exploit is gone, missile countermeasures work more reliably, vehicle spawn should be more consistent again, and weapon handling during transitions like sprinting, jumping, or sliding should feel smoother. But it's perhaps not the massive end-all be-all solution we were all hoping for before the holidays. Until Battlefield 6 gets a full rework of its recoil logic, hit reg, and networking stability, patches like 1.1.1.5 are welcome, but simply a single step towards a much larger solution down the road. Now, Battlefield 6 is currently losing around 10,000 concurrent players a day on Steam alone. Yes, player drop-off after release is normal, but after all the hype and momentum this game had, this feels different. The game that debuted to nearly 1 million concurrent players on Steam now sits with mixed reviews and shrinking engagement just 30 days into its life. 4 major studios, hundreds of millions in funding, and years of development, and somehow we're celebrating a patch that fixes camera shake and missile countermeasures, instead of fixing the fundamental gameplay loop that they had months and months of testing for with Battlefield Labs. Even many of the big streamers who hyped the game during its release have already moved on, like Tim the Tatman, who only streamed RedSec twice before jumping ship to Arc Raiders. The audience who wanted this to be a triumphant return of Battlefield is watching an over-engineered shooter lose players to smaller studios and indie titles because of problems that should have been solved in QA months ago. Now, to be fair, I'll give DICE some credit. This patch proves that someone on the team is listening, fixing the recon drone exploit, cleaning up broken vehicle spawns, and stabilizing match flow in Battle Royale shows a commitment to tightening the experience. These are the right kinds of fixes for quality of life updates, and they do make the game more stable at a surface level. But after all this time, money, and feedback, we shouldn't be continuing to wait on larger foundational patches or improved stability. And I'm afraid the game's core systems and bugs have already thrown a lot of players off the wagon. So while I can genuinely say that update 1.1.1.5 is a step in the right direction, it's still just that, a step. The long road ahead for Battlefield 6 isn't paved with small bug fixes, it's paved with deep, systematic changes to how the game handles gunplay, stability, and player feedback. Until that foundation is solid, all the minor improvements in the world won't keep players from leaving. But I want to hear what you guys think. Has patch 1.1.1.5 made the game feel any better for you, and are these fixes enough to bring you back? Drop those comments below, and for everything else Battlefield, stay tuned and subscribe. And as always, thank you guys for watching.